Welcome to another episode of the Informing Choices mini-pod. There comes a point when the boundaries of science and magic seem to blur. Yet at the same time, we can perhaps see that the potential of science and technology to deliver the tools and applications of the future is limited only by our imagination. So in this episode of the podcast, we will explore cutting-edge ideas, potential innovations, mind-bending advancements, and awe-inspiring discoveries that seem straight out of a wizard spellbook. Today, I'm opening the spellbook with the help of strategic communicator and futurist Gina Clifford. Gina, a warm welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Steve. I love your introduction. That's so much fun. I can't wait to get started on this conversation.
Well, we're going to talk, aren't we, about three fascinating potential technology developments. So let's start with this. Plants that evolve to grow technology. Tell me about the potential applications for this sort of technology.
Well, as we may or may not know, depending on your interest in this topic, scientists are actually delving into the plant world and creating devices inside of plants. And for example, there were researchers that fed plants a polymer that allowed its roots to hold electricity. So they act as super capacitors in the roots. And apparently it doesn't affect biological plant. So the plant goes along its life cycle just as it normally would. It just so happens to have this superpower in addition. But there are other things that people are doing. Scientists are growing like nanoscale wires and embedding them into plants or growing them within plants so that plants can conduct electricity. And the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency in the US called DARPA is doing a lot around plants. They're actually doing a lot of science fiction, almost magic, as you describe it, research into things that sound very science fiction, but in fact could be reality in the next, 10 years, perhaps. But one of the things that they're doing is they're thinking about plants as biosensors, but not by adding things onto plants, but actually genetically modifying plants so that they can live in the environment and look and act normally, they grow normally. But if you have some kind of maybe a handheld receiver, you can actually read what the plants are telling you. So you can genetically modify them to respond to different changes in the environment. Or maybe, if you think about a military application, if there's movement or, if the plants are injured from trampling, or maybe a biohazard chemical that they sense. So this handheld reader, you might walk through and you might see that the plants have changed their response to the environment, indicating there's a chemical present or something. But I mean, just use your imagination how that could be used. It could be used to help climate change. We could, create fields of dandelions that give us a warning that maybe the temperatures are, in remote places, the temperatures are changing, and maybe it's a sensitive environment. So scientists can use it as low-cost sensors instead of putting battery-operated devices in the field and having people go out there and maintain them. These things live in the world just as we do. The other thing that I thought was really interesting was that some scientists they used, I guess, synthetic biology to implant something into a plant to store data. And then that plant had seeds and it passed the information on to its seedlings.
Wow.
So you can think about these sensors as being, generational, so that you put them in there once and they might last until maybe the DNA mutates to a point where it doesn't work anymore. But the cost will probably be minimal compared to putting electronic sensors in there. So to take it into the realm of magic, I think if that's not magical enough, is to imagine that at some point, if we're meddling with plants like this, what happens when plants start to do this on their own? What if plants start to evolve and adapt and take in some of these polymers or some of these genetic mutations and start creating other things. What could they create? A tiny little camera or a lens of some sort, or some kind of other sensor that the plant starts to use for its own use. So I don't know of any science that proves that, but I think if you want to look into the future on the what if, that's kind of where my mind goes. And so what kind of future, in the far future, we think of plants as food, we think of them as, creating oxygen, but what if they start using technology to create some new ways of communicating with each other? And, they're using some of the things that we're doing and using it for their own use. So that's a far-flung idea that makes you wonder about science fiction, going into the realm of science fiction and what we could do to think about how that world would look.
It's interesting, isn't it, how sometimes the world of science fiction and science plausible starts to merge. One of the things that struck me that you spoke about a couple of minutes ago was the idea of replacing, I suppose, external sensors with sensors or sensing capability inside plants. So perhaps the plants can tell the irrigation system when they need water. They can tell the services around the farm when they need protecting against pests. So the automation of farming is not from external technology, but perhaps from technology within the plants.
Oh, exactly. So you have automation and you have intelligence. So in some ways you have a complete system that's organic. So this whole science of electric plants is actually a niche, but it's emerging. And I think that those applications will make it more important in the future.
And what about using some of these technologies to provide the opportunity for plants to communicate with other plants, perhaps even to communicate with humans? What sort of application there might we see, do you think?
I mean, if you wanted to think about the recreational drugs and people might want to tap into the plant and maybe encourage certain aspects of the plant to grow. Now, I'm not saying that you would talk to the plant with words, but you might influence growth habits to create more of a, in the recreational drug, just because that's probably a big market. And as things become legal, people are going to start to think more creatively about how do they make a better, more unique product. What if you could, communicate with a plant and influence its development of certain chemicals that it already produces to make it more potent? But then think of it as using as a medical, so the pharmacists and people might be able to encourage plants to produce more medicine that the plants are extracted from plants. I don't know. There's just, if you really start to think about, not what's possible today, but based on what's happening right now, what could be possible, what could you imagine? And without the science actually being there today. And, the people are already recording sounds of plants and putting it to music and things like that. So perhaps if you take it into the entertainment world, do you sing to plants and they create a harmony based on your words? Why not? There's electrical signals there, we can capture them, and people have already created music. So there's crazy entertainment. But who knows, beyond medicine and beyond entertainment and beyond recreational drugs, I can't even imagine what else people might want to do when they can communicate with plants.
I was listening to a piece a little while ago that was talking about using plants and other natural elements of our environment to monitor ecological protection, environmental protection, subtle changes perhaps as a result of climate change. And one of the things that comes to my mind is that given the greater understanding we have of things like mycelium networks, then all of a sudden, if you're able to tap into the communication between plants, then maybe there's an early warning system about environmental protection that can be built up. So there's a lot more we could possibly exploit about plants, about the natural production, the natural plant environment, to actually help us as a society, isn't there?
Absolutely. I think that we think of plants in a very naive way. As humans. We look at them as maybe an inferior species of organism on the planet. And actually, every time I look and do some research on plants, I find that we've been doing as humans very, I guess, brute force. So, for example, some plants were found to uptake metals. They uptake metals and they hold them in the wood, in the stems of the plant. And so those are metals that we're mining, and we're making toxic chemicals and lots of destruction to the earth to try to get at these metals and then process them. The whole process is toxic, it's time consuming, it's expensive. But plants are already mining the earth of metals and they're holding it in their bodies. So it would be as simple as harvesting these plants and extracting some of the metal right there. So if you think about the ways that we're not using plants, but the things that we're discovering about them, you start to wonder. So what you said about tapping into the mycelium networks and tapping into the plant mycelium communications to nurture growth, to understand what's happening in the environment as climate changes. The things that you discover about plants helps you to not chalk that up to fantasy or science fiction, but to start to respect and understand that there's a lot we don't know. And the more we learn, the more amazing the opportunities seem to reveal themselves. So I think it's a mindset shift on, plants aren't something to be trodden upon or eaten. They're also something to be looked upon as another organism that is doing amazing things in the environment, probably in a much more sustainable way than humans are doing it, communications wise, communications with each other, communications with the mycelium networks, what have you. And they're using it kind of like as an internet, right? So I don't know that humans will ever tap into it and use it in that context to watch YouTube videos or cat videos. But, if we can tap into it and understand some of the early warning signals, if things are changing in the environment, that would be a first great step. But yeah, can you imagine that having your finger on the pulse of what's happening around the world underground in the roots of these plants, and understanding where the stresses are, and helping to heal the environment, maybe using the same networks to share nutrients or something that help repair the systems. So yeah, I think, mind shift away from humans as dominant species on the planet, and understanding that we share the world with species that we know very little bit about, can unlock a lot of different thinking for us, and a lot of different ways of being and communicating and living and processing things. So our manufacturing processes aren't as extractive and destructive as maybe some of these natural processing systems.
It's absolutely fascinating, isn't it? And the thing that particularly strikes me there is, if we learn more about plants and how plants work, their kind of deeper, I suppose, almost hidden biology, then actually them, as well as utilizing and exploiting those applications, we actually learn how these things work, and perhaps can use that intelligence to build more effective technologies elsewhere, in the same way that the more we learn about the human brain, the more we can build better artificial intelligence applications. I want to take us now on to the second area that we said we were going to talk about. And we've seen how extreme weather driven by climate change can impact the world. How might something like environmental skins help us? And what is it we actually mean by environmental skins?
So in my mind, and of course, DARPA is already working on these. I've seen news reports of decommissioned suits that make you invisible or that are protective against biological poisons, gases, things like that. But what I envision, and this is a future vision, is a suit that you would wear because as a citizen of Earth in, maybe 2050 or beyond, when the Earth's temperature has exceeded what it is today by maybe 10 degrees, and everyone is struggling with not only heat but extremes, right? Extreme weather, but not just weather, but maybe the weather, the extremes are causing a lot of political and geopolitical turmoil, so that even a citizen that's traveling might not feel safe. So in my world, thinking in the future, a suit that is thin as your skin, but has all of these applications that and I like to think of it as an app store, and by today's standards, have all of these features that can be added to this basic suit. Now the basic suit could be made of a biomaterial that maybe it doesn't need to be washed, it doesn't need to it lasts a very long time, it's very durable, but it's very soft and supple. It would be temperature conforming, so it would keep your body temperature at a normal temperature, even when it's really hot or very cold. So it's very soft, it's very comfortable. It could be bulletproof. It could be, again, it could deflect all kinds of viruses and poisons, because as the temperatures rise and climate changes, we're to face all kinds of new viruses we hadn't seen before. So this suit could be everything that you might need. But the matter of fact is, you would probably buy this generic suit. It has a basic, keeps you warm, keeps you cool, maybe protects you against some of the environmental hazards of radiation and things like that. But what I'm thinking is all the things that I just said, bulletproof, or it might make you invisible. It might make you silent. So when you walk, there's no sound that comes from you. All of those things could be upgrades through, quote, an app store. And that's for me a fun idea of how we think about how we augment our lives right now through apps on our phones. But what if the future, the technologies that we communicate with are maybe more integrated into ourselves? So maybe we have internal computing, or some kind of implant or something. Maybe it's a bio implant, but it connects us with kind of what we would think of as the internet today. And so the suit is connected to that. And so it might be extremely easy to purchase a digital upgrade to your suit. And so maybe the suit unlocks these other potential features when you purchase. And who knows, maybe it's some kind of a coin system, right? A digital coin system that you're using in the future. And it's as simple as just allocating some coins to purchase this app. And maybe there will be third-party app developers. So the things that will be available to your suit, like color changing, which probably you could do today, special suits or special features for special applications. Maybe you are working in an environment where there's lots of a certain chemical that you want to be resistant to, or maybe for some reason you want to be invisible, or you want to be silent as you're walking, or use your imagination. Maybe you want a certain scent to be around you when you walk, and the suit would be invisible to others, right? So you'd be walking around in a very thin, conformed, I would say, like a bodysuit. But I think that they won't be the things that military soldiers use. They will be things that we all will have. That will be, you won't buy clothes at the designer stores. I think everyone will just wear these suits. In a changing climate, why not just have a suit that you don't need to wash, that, it's impenetrable to bacteria, doesn't ever get odor, doesn't get dirty, it's probably nano coated. So it's, extreme advanced technology, extremely advanced materials to make all of this happen, make it real. But I think all the technologies are already in development, are already there. We just have to pull them together into something that fits. And who knows, by 2050, we might all be wearing these suits.
That's absolutely fascinating idea. And there's a couple of things that particularly strike me there. Is one, what if these suits could actually grow with you?
Ooh.
So almost just after you're born, well, one of the first things that happens to your child is you fit the appropriate suit. And actually, one of the things I guess we're potentially going to see in the mid to longer term future, perhaps, is the use of genetic technologies to change aspects about our bodies. And maybe this is a safer way to do that. A second skin almost is a safer way to protect us from certain diseases, from certain types of infection, as well as a different way to bring us closer to technology rather than actually having the technology surgically inserted inside us. So they represent some really fascinating opportunities in the future, don't they?
Yes, it's exciting. I hadn't thought of that one, but a suit that grows with you, I could see that, it was one suit forever, right? You don't really need to purchase a suit. So what does that do to the clothing industry? How does that industry tap into this from a fashion perspective? So I assume that if you think of it from a consumer perspective, if you only have one suit, only need one suit because it grows with you, then you probably want to still look different, right? You want to have your personality reflected in your suit. So how would a fashion industry tap into that? What could they do? I don't know, but I think it might be interesting to think about how the suit has a layer, and maybe it's some kind of a chemical that changes colors, in different patterns, so that designers would have these patterns, and it would be like an app on the App Store. You could go and look through all their designs and try them on, and then if you like one, select it, and have a whole wardrobe of them stored, so that if you're going to a party, you want to look a little bit more blingy, you could add that suit augmentation, outer so that everyone sees it as something very flashy. And then perhaps you're going to go to a show or something, and it's maybe a more formal event, so maybe it's black and white. So I don't know. It's a fun future to explore, and it's fun to think about these, how it could be, if we could just make the technology work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. I've also now thought that perhaps these suits would help protect the early explorers of Mars from additional radiation and so on. So it actually helps accelerate exploration of near planets in the solar system. Absolutely fascinating. Let's switch now to the third of our three topics, because we're starting to see kind of conceptual ideas, I suppose, new fields of science where we're actually considering DNA computing. How might we use that? Where might we see that applied, do you think?
I've been thinking about DNA computing for a long time. I remember it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, there was a lot of hype around taking biological components and creating basic circuit devices, like you would think about like a semiconductor, and controlling them to create circuits that we can think of as a device to do things, to do work. And if so that has progressed, and now I think you can buy components on the market and create your own DNA computing device, right? But the real benefits have yet to be applied, right? There's still many problems. It's not scalable, and living organisms make a lot of errors. So there's a lot of things that still need to be worked out with DNA computing. But if you think about being able to control something so tiny and so powerful, because DNA is like a organic hard drive, right? It can store lots and lots of data. and it can replicate like a computer might do. So it does things already that could be very useful if we can harness that. So I think one of the things that that astounds me that I've read is that like a pound of DNA can hold all of the world's computing, everything that's ever been data that's ever been created. A pound of DNA
Wow.
could hold all of that from all the computers in the world and all the data they've created. So imagine how we might store data. So imagine a supercomputer needing to tap into huge amounts of data. I mean, that kind of data in that tiny bit of storage doesn't exist anywhere else today. So if we can harness computers or DNA to be a computer, to get rid of some of the problems of scalability and errors that it naturally has, then imagine a supercomputer being able to, instead of ones and zeros that binary computers use, DNA has 4 base pairs, right? So imagine being able to, I guess it's like parallel computing, be able to attack a problem, in 4 different ways, but also being able to store an unfathomable amount of data and with almost immediate access. So the problems that we can't explore right now because we're limited by our systems, and just think about the environmental impact of some of these supercomputers right now today. Just the amount of power that's generated to control them and then cool them. Well, DNA doesn't need any of that. It could literally do things instantly, exponentially greater at capacity to store data. Right now, they're kind of slow in the processing, but I'm sure with technology advancements and synthetic biology, that those errors will be reduced and we'll eventually have something that's unfathomable as far as like the amount of storage and tiny footprint. So if you think to the far future and we figure all of that out, we could do things like we could extend our own memories with our own DNA, right? We could take DNA and have it as like an augmentation to ourselves and have this, instead of artificial intelligence. If you think about what people are talking about right now, is this everything that's out there can be retrieved and pulled together. Why don't you just put that into your DNA computer and have it with you and have access to it through your brain in a more organic way? So I don't know if that's crazy science fiction stuff right now, but it's probably on the roadmap in some scientists' laboratory. And just the ability to use a computer that small that can grow. So DNA that replicates. So if you need more computing power, you just let it grow, and then you have access to a computer that grows as the data grows, and as the problem grows, you just grow the computer to fill the need. And when I'm talking growth, I'm talking fits in a test tube or something that size. It's not taking up your desk space. I don't know how they will physically look, but I think the problems that we can't solve even with supercomputers, like looking at cures for dread diseases, or thinking about what's beyond our universe, so the solar system and the universe, and using it to analyze data that even our best supercomputers can't yet tackle. So those are some of the things I see in the future. But I don't know. What are your thoughts? What have you been delving into in the world of DNA computing?
There's such a big focus on achievement of artificial general intelligence and ultimately perhaps artificial super intelligence. Perhaps what we'll see is those journeys towards those technologies replaced by a journey towards natural super intelligence, which is one thing that particularly struck me, and particularly if we can enhance our own intelligence, our own memory, by using our own DNA as the storage mechanism for that information, and we have an effective way of retrieval, then that just kind of blows some of the fears perhaps we have about artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence, artificial superintelligence out of the water. I suppose it doesn't necessarily take away some of those fears away completely, because as well as instead of potentially irrational machines in the future who just have enhanced irrational humans, which have proven to be quite dangerous in the past, haven't they? Yeah, some of the ideas of the problems that we can solve with DNA computing, again, are limited by our imagination, aren't they?
Exactly. But I love where you're going with that. And I think that we have, humans have such a depth of knowledge. Each of us are unique because of our unique experiences in the world. And we have a lot of things that are trapped in our memories that maybe they're back there in our, subconscious, but we can't hold it all. So I love what you're thinking about our own super intelligence using our own DNA, because we now have this computer that's built on our DNA to hold everything that we've ever experienced and have, and we can recall it quickly as we could on a computer, but it's within our brains. And I think as scary as getting a computer virus in your DNA might be, if you think about, the downsides, the hacking that could happen when we're all little computers walking around. But I do agree that people probably would be much more attuned to having something that's part of them already than something that seems alien almost, as an intelligence that bodes ill for us, as it takes all of the information that we've created and now spits it back at us faster than any of us could ever do. So what if we could, as human beings, challenge that and be that? Then we would be the ultimate superpower and in on Earth, and some of those fears might subside. But I like where you're going with that, and I would vote for that.
Yeah. I think even I would suggest that I'm not on the ticket. Gina, one of the things that strikes me about these three broad topics that we've not really done justice to, but it was an absolutely fascinating conversation. One of the kind of the connecting piece between all of them, I think, is the natural world. So we started talking about plants that evolved to grow tech or to have tech implanted in them. Then we spoke about using technology to protect us from some of our natural enemies, so pathogens, viruses, bacteria, to this external skin to keep us safe. And then we talked in the end then about using natural DNA to enhance our cognitive abilities, to enhance our computational abilities, so that we can really work out how to solve some of humanity's biggest problems in the future. So for me, the kind of the natural strand running all through those three things we've spoken about today is the natural world. So I really want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast and giving us those topics to talk about.
It was a pleasure, Steve. Thank you so much.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. Do let your friends and colleagues know about the Informing Choices mini pod, and there'll be another episode along very soon.